All right, good afternoon, everyone. Going to reconvene the council here. Looks like we have council members around the table. Looks like staff is ready to roll. So our next agenda item is recreational tilefish permitting and reporting framework. And I see Jose and Hannah on the other side here. So whenever you guys are ready to get us started, I'd appreciate it. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chair. And as the chairman mentioned, we'll be talking about the recreational tilefish permitting and reporting framework that we've been working on. So for a little outline today, first I'll go into some background on the private recreational permitting and reporting requirement. And just for clarity, we are only talking about private recreational today, not any other component of the recreational sector. And then from there, I'll speak briefly to the performance of this program in general. After that, I have a quick review over the 2024 program evaluation that we did last year. And then from there, the bulk of the presentation will go into the modified draft range of alternatives and some potential next steps. The primary goal of today's meeting is to get guidance on the modified range of alternatives. So just as a reminder, last October, we reviewed a range of alternatives, and since then, staff has come up with some modified changes. So for some background, in 2016, the council adopted Amendment 6 to the Tilefish FMP. Through this amendment, blue line tilefish was added to the Tilefish FMP plan, and it established management measures for blue line in the Mid-Atlantic region. Through this amendment, a designated private recreational permit as well as reporting requirements were also established for both tilefish species, so both blue line and golden. A little over a year later, in 2017, Amendment 6 was approved by NIMS. However, the final rule, it highlighted that implementation of this program would be delayed to allow for more time to set the system needed for implementation. Then later in August 2020, the requirements were implemented, and since then, the council has had annual updates provided by GARFO to show the trends in the number of permits issued each year, as well as the trips reported. So during final action for Amendment 6, it was highlighted that a dedicated private recreational permit and reporting program for tilefish was needed to support effective conservation and management of these two species. As many of you know, this fishery occurs far offshore, and in comparison to some of our other managed species, relatively few anglers participate in the tilefish, in targeting tilefish. And because of that there are few tilefish anglers, there are generally few anglers intercepted through the MRIP program. So given this low intercept rate, MRIP tilefish estimates include very high % standard errors associated with them, often exceeding 80%. And because of this, the rationale for these requirements was to collect reliable catch information, which was and remains a key data gap for both tile species today. The current requirements include a free vessel-based permit that is mandatory for any vessel intending to fish for golden or blue line tilefish in federal waters north of the Virginia-North Carolina. And the reporting requirements require operators of those vessels to submit an electronic vessel trip report for any trip targeting tilefish. And this is even if no tilefish are caught on those trips. There are currently a number of electronic reporting platforms that these vessel operators can use, and the trip reports must be submitted within 24 hours after their fishing trip ends. And then on the right, this is the list of information that is currently required for these vessel operators to report. And I just wanted to highlight that in part, these regulations were implemented because implementation was delayed, but also what you see on the right is also modeled after what was or what is currently required for hire trips. So in development of this amendment, there was little council feedback on what the actual reporting required should be, and it was more modeled based off of the for hire permitting requirements, and those were implemented by GARFO, as I mentioned on the previous slide, several years later. There are some differences between what the council recommended during final action through Amendment 6 compared to what was actually implemented by GARFO in 2020. For example, the council had recommended that the EVTRs for private recreational anglers be submitted once returning to port before any tilefish were removed from the vessel. But final rule implemented that trips had to be submitted within 24 hours. And this was modeled after the HMS reporting requirements. And then also the council had recommended that EVTRs be submitted for any trip that catch tilefish, but then in final rule, there was language that required EVTRs to be submitted on any trip that targets tilefish. So that includes trips that aren't landing tilefish. Since implementation of these requirements, the council has reviewed the number of permits and reported trips on an annual basis, which from year to year show low reporting rates. And this mismatch between the number of permits that are issued annually compared to the total number of reported tilefish trips seems to be a trend that we're seeing each year consistently. Looking at the most recent full year of data, so 2023 as well as, or excuse me, 2024 as well as 2025 data through September, you'll notice that we continue to see this increase in the number of permits issued as well as the proportion of permits renewed, indicated by the gray and blue bars in the graph on the left. But if we look at the number of reported trips as shown in the figure on the right, although you see a slight increasing trend in the total number of reported tilefish trips shown in the pink bars, the percentage of permits reporting have been pretty low and stable across the past 5 years, between about 2 and 4% each year, depending on the year. So for example, in 2025, as of September, there were 1,400 permits issued, but only 65 of those permits reported catching tilefish, and only 122 trips were actually reported. Additionally, you'll see in the graph on the right that each year there's also a number or a couple trips that are reporting no catch, no tilefish catch, and sometimes no catch at all. But because there's no way to tie these trips to an actual targeted tilefish trip, there's no way to determine if these trips were targeting tilefish and just didn't catch any, or if they were targeting a different species like tuna, for example. So to better understand why the tilefish reporting rates are so low, staff worked with a couple contractors last year on 2 tilefish projects. The first project was a targeted outreach campaign to try and increase awareness with these requirements. And then the second project was a program evaluation. The council received a presentation on this effort and the outcomes as a result of it in October 2024. And this work, as well as council deliberation during that meeting, really helped pave the way for this framework action that we're discussing today. So during the program evaluation, a series of focus group discussions were held in areas where we know anglers target tilefish, as shown in the map on the left. And the objectives of this evaluation were to better understand why the private recreational reporting rates are so low and identify factors that would increase angler participation in the program. As I mentioned, the council reviewed the recommendations that came out of this evaluation last October. And the general conclusion of this evaluation was that the program is not achieving the goals as originally intended, largely due to the lack of participation as well as concerns related to the reliability of the data submitted. The final report highlighted a number of key recommendations as listed on this slide, including the recommendation to consider regulatory changes to simplify the reporting requirements and eliminate the requirement to report fishing efforts, which is boxed here in red. So focusing solely on the feedback related to the reporting requirements, focus group participants emphasized that the complexity and wording of the tilefish reporting requirements are a major barrier to compliance. Many fields were seen as overly technical, duplicative, or irrelevant to recreational fishing practices, leading to widespread confusion. Anglers noted challenges with reporting efforts, such as the need to break down their fishing activity by statistical area or provide granular details such as the number of hooks, the depths, the trip times, all things that are difficult for them to recall and that don't feel very meaningful to recreational trips. They highlighted that many of the required fields seem to be a carryover from commercial reporting systems, and that although commercial fishermen and maybe even for hire captains are familiar with things like statistical areas, this information is not necessarily intuitive to the private recreational community. These requirements, coupled with the confusing layout and terminology in the reporting application, have created this perception that the reporting requirements are both burdensome and impractical. And as a result, fishermen replied or commented that the low willingness to participate, and they raised concerns about the reliability of even the information being submitted, and that it's probably inaccurate or incomplete for all these reasons. So as staff has been working through this framework, we've been coming back to where are the basic data needs for Tilefish, specifically as it relates to this program. And we keep coming back to the fact that at this time, we have very little reliable recreational catch data available for both of these two tilefish species, and currently stock assessments for both of these species rely on either MRIP data, which has very high % standard errors associated with it, or the large pelagic survey information that comes from a survey that's truly designed to collect catch information for HMS. So without reliable catch information, it's difficult to understand total removals each year or evaluate how the recreational harvest may be influencing stock status. And this gap is especially consequential for blue line, where we have 73% of our ABC allocated to the recreational sector each year, and golden, which currently has no recreational allocation, but nevertheless is subject to recreational fishing pressure. So discussions with the Science Center stock assessment lead for both of these tilefish species also reaffirmed that improving private recreational catch estimates is one of the highest priorities for both of these species, and that reliable catch information is essential for things I mentioned on the previous slide, as well as tracking removals over time, detecting changes in participation and catch rates, as well as needed to support credible stock assessments. And without accurate catch data, the current assessments are relying on high uncertain assumptions, which ultimately leads to reduced confidence in the results, both from the managers as well as stakeholders' perspectives. So given all that, the purpose of this framework action is to evaluate and consider changes to the private recreational tilefish permitting and reporting program to ensure that the regulatory approach is appropriate, effective, and proportionate to the data needs for managing blue line and golden. This action seeks to identify an approach that reduces unnecessary burden, improves clarity and enforceability, and supports the collection of reliable information needed for our stock assessments and management where feasible. And the need for this action is to address ongoing challenges with the current permit and reporting program, including low compliance, confusion over reporting requirements, limited enforceability, and concerns about data accuracy. Reliable recreational catch information is necessary to support effective stock assessments and management for our tilefish species, yet current reporting requirements are not producing such information. So regulatory changes are needed to improve or even discontinue this program. So since our last meeting, staff has rearranged and modified the range of alternatives. So there are now 4 alternatives, and within alternative 4, there is 5 sub-alternatives. This was in part based on council direction during our meeting in October, as well as to fully capture the range of actions that could be analyzed and considered through this framework. So the first alternative would be the no action or status quo option. This would maintain the current permit and reporting requirements, so everything that I presented on slide 5. Alternative 2 includes completely eliminating the current permitting and reporting program. So under this alternative, private vessel owner and operators would no longer be required to obtain a permit to target tilefish and no longer be subject to specific reporting requirements. Since this program was implemented, there has been consistently low participation and confusion surrounding the reporting requirements. There has also been concerns associated with the accuracy of such self-reported information and its overall usefulness in science and management in general. And there is no guarantee that continued investment of staff time, resources, and outreach may substantially improve compliance or data quality to the extent needed. So if the council chooses to eliminate the program altogether, we could instead shift our focus on alternative data collection approaches in the future if there is desire to do that. Under alternative 3, the private recreational tilefish the permitting requirement will remain in place, but the associated reporting requirements would be removed from federal regulations. So maintain the permit requirement under this alternative acknowledges the limited effectiveness of the current reporting requirements. So everything I highlighted on the previous slide, like low compliance, confusion, the associated burden, and data accuracy, but it preserves the mechanism to identify a universe of private recreational anglers that are interested in the tilefish fishery. Maintaining the permit requirement may also support efforts to develop more practical approaches for collecting recreational catch and effort information, and retaining this permit registry, if you will, also provides managers with information about the number and distribution of anglers that are intending to target tilefish, and it could enhance future outreach efforts. That brings us to alternative 4, which includes a suite of sub-alternatives that consider modifications to the current reporting requirements. The sub-alternatives under alternative 4 can be selected individually or in combination with each other. So that's just something to keep in mind, not only today, but when we move to final action later next year. Based on feedback we heard from those focus groups specific to the reporting effort, subalternative 4.1 would remove the requirement to report effort-only trips and only require submission of an EVTR for trips that catch or land tilefish. Some things to consider here: during the council's initial discussions about the reporting program, the original intent of the program was to never collect effort-only trips, and that was something that was later added in implementation when GARFO implemented 4 years later. Effort-only trips are also effectively unenforceable. When an angler returns without any catch, there's no practical way for law enforcement to determine whether that angler was actually targeting tilefish during that trip. And then because of this, it's unlikely that anglers are even submitting EVTRs when they may be targeting tilefish but not catching them. Subalternative 4.2 gets at some of the frustrations with the with how complex the reporting requirements are, and it aims to simplify the reporting requirements by removing certain data fields that are either confusing or not yielding usable information. The table on the bottom here shows on the left the fields that would be eliminated, in the middle the fields that would be maintained, and then on the right, during the meeting in October, there was some expressed interest to maintain some sort of fishing location associated with the reporting requirements. So on the right, that's the data field that would need further analysis and direction today. So since the purpose and need of this action is to prioritize collecting reliable catch information, the reporting fields that would be maintained through subalternative 4.2 focus on the essential information needed to identify a vessel and permit holder, as well as the fields that support the collection of our most immediate management and stock assessment needs. So like understanding the number of anglers fishing, the count of tilefish landed and discarded on each trip, as well as the port and state landed where those fish were landed. Through discussions with the Tilefish stock assessment lead, it was made clear to staff that improving the accuracy and completeness of the recreational catch estimates is the highest priority. So the fields listed here balances simplifying the reporting requirements, but still maintaining the fields that meet those most immediate stock assessment needs. And keeping only these fields provides our best chance at improving compliance and high quality data. So here are the list of fields that would be eliminated under subalternative 4.2. During the program evaluation, many anglers expressed reluctance to submit an EBTR given much confusion and frustration surrounded by the requirements to report a lot of these fields highlighted on the slide. Anglers specifically reported being unsure how to report depth and things like soak time, when that can vary across a single trip or even across a single drag, similar to depth, also lat long, as they're fishing for tilefish on a single, when they put their gear in the water on a single drag, that can vary. And so they're not quite sure exactly what depth to report or what lat long to report, because it can vary across that short distance. And then for the fields that need further analysis, as I mentioned at our October meeting, staff originally proposed eliminating chart area based on recommendations from that program evaluation. However, council members requested further consideration of maintaining some form of location information outside of just state and port landed. Council direction is needed regarding whether to include chart area in that list of data fields to maintain. And with this, though, there's a couple things to keep in mind, and it's important to consider how collection of such information will be used in signs or for management purposes. Although general fishing locations like chart area does offer some insight into where people are fishing, it is not necessarily needed to understand recreational catch estimates. Additionally, other council-managed recreational fisheries operate without collecting this type of self-reported information, and stock assessments don't necessarily depend on this information to understand total removals each year. And then while broad patterns of where anglers fish may be interesting for or as an informational standpoint, it's not essential for catch accounting, and it would add reporting burden without providing meaningful management value. Subalternative 4.3 would add new length or add a new field to report length or weight. This option was developed in response to some expressed interest during the October meeting when the council reviewed the original range of alternatives. Council members noted that biological data such as size and weight could help support future stock assessments and management needs. Under this subalternative, anglers would be required to report their length and weight of all tilefish landed and potentially those released as well as part of their EBTRs. So although biological data such as size and weight can be useful for stock assessments and management, adding these fields would increase the complexity of the reporting process. So this conflicts with the primary purpose of this action, which is to increase participation and improve accuracy by making it as simple as possible. There are also practical challenges associated with mandatory length and weight reporting. Many recreational vessels may carry basic measuring boards or rulers, but relatively few carry a scale capable of producing reliable weight measurements. The cost of scales can vary tremendously, with simple scales costing as low as $20, but more accurate and precise scales can cost upwards of $100. And even when scales may be available, given boat motion, accurate weight readings are extremely challenging to get. And then it's also important to keep in mind that this framework action was included in the Restoring American Seafood Competitiveness EO, and this subalternative may not align well with the emphasis of that EO, which is to streamline things and improve American seafood competitiveness. But if the council is interested in collecting recreational biological data, there are other approaches in doing so other than mandatory reporting. And if there's interest in that, we can talk to that or come up with some ideas to come back to the council in the future. Some alternative 4.4 would require the EVRs to be filled out with all the required information as it becomes available and prior to entering port. Under this option, information would need to be filled out through a NMFS approved electronic report as soon as it becomes available. So this would mean that the vessel owner and operator would have to fill out the EVTR throughout the course of the trip. Subalternative 4.4 preserves the flexibility by still allowing anglers up to 24 hours to submit and complete an EVTR. However, it ensures that an electronic record exists immediately upon returning to port, which could help address enforcement challenges. This approach also aligns the private recreational requirements with existing logbook requirements for hire and commercial vessels, which I'll show you on the next slide. And this subalternative also reinforces the expectations of timely and verifiable information. So this table shows the requirements by permit type during a trip as well as a submission time frame. As I noted, in the middle column here highlights what is required for commercial and for hire vessels compared to private recreational vessels. For commercial and for hire vessels, they must fill out all of the available information prior to entering port. There are things they cannot fill out before entering port, but everything that they can, they are required to do so. But in the private recreational Tilefish regulations, it says they may keep paper records while on board and upload that data after landing. So alternative 4.4 would be just aligning that across all sectors. And then subalternative 4.5, this option would require vessel owner and operators to submit an EVTR as soon as they return to port before any fish are offloaded. This subalternative reflects the council's original intent during development of Amendment 6, given requiring EVTRs to submit prior to offloading and if any fish has a clear enforcement benefit and alignment with the original purpose of the program. It's also important to recognize that private recreational trips differ in nature compared to commercial and for hire operations, so a stricter time frame may be appropriate. And as I noted earlier, subalternatives under alternative 4 may be selected individually or in combination with each other. And together, subalternative 4.4 and 4.5 provides the greatest level of enforceability. So just something to keep in mind. So that concludes all the different alternatives. This table just outlines the tentative timeline for this framework. If the council decides to approve the modified range of alternatives during today's discussion, in early 2026, staff would continue to analyze the alternatives. We would host a public input meeting to gather stakeholder feedback, and then a Tilefish committee meeting to consider any stakeholder input and refine the alternatives. And then we will return to the council for final action tentatively in April, with the expectation for a final rulemaking package to be submitted to NMFS in spring or summer 2026. And with that, that concludes the presentation. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Hannah. So to the council, questions on the presentation? Mike Louisi.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Hannah, for the presentation. So in your discussions, has anyone indicated what possible, I guess, what could happen as a result of not having a reporting program? I understand we're operating on very poor data right now. We're trying to make that information better, but if we ultimately remove this reporting requirement, is there any consequence to the fishery? Would we still be able? Is the fishery just going to continue as is without bettering the information? I guess I'd like to understand what consequence there would be to having no reporting at all. I guess that's my question. Thanks.
Yeah, so kind of difficult to answer, right? Because right now we're not using this information, and I'm not sure, based on how it currently lays it out, I don't see a future where we can use this information because no one's reporting their trips. So I don't, under the current framework, I don't know that we're ever going to get reliable catch estimates that we could actually use in our stock assessments and for management decisions. If we eliminate it, that could free up some staff time and resources, and we could try to go back to the drawing board and see, are there other ways and avenues to collect good catch information for data poor species or deep water species like this? I know it's something the South Atlantic constantly talks about, as they often deal with this. So I don't know that there's a consequence. I mean, I know it takes away something that we've already invested in, but it's not working as it's currently laid out. So if we eliminate it, it would just mean we go back to the drawing board and we continue, because right now we are relying on MRIP and LPS for our management decisions and our stock assessments. So it would just be continuing to rely on that information.
You okay, Mike? Chris?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Hannah, you had a slide that presented that alternative, right? So we can pull that up. So there's what we have in the document right now regarding your question, Mike. So it really comes down to, we can take one of two pathways, right? Either just forget about this, terminate the program, or improve it. So the whole idea behind this framework is basically finding a way to improve it so that we get more folks to report, provide the information that might be useful for stock assessment purposes. But Hannah's right. Right now, there's just not enough people reporting.
Follow up, Mike?
Yeah, very quickly, Mr. Chairman, thank you. I guess so, looking at it on the flip side, by enhancing the reporting and bettering the information, is there a possible scenario where it benefits fishermen somehow? If we learn more and understand more, maybe they'd have more access, or I'm just looking at it both ways, because thinking about, I really like the way it's been laid out, and I think if we decide as a council to keep our foot on the pedal here, I think listening to the fishermen, modifying some of the requirements, and giving that a shot to good. For me, that would be the way that I would support that right now. But without there being any disincentive for not reporting, and there being no incentive to report, I just don't know how you're going to get people to do that. And that's just a human nature thing. I don't know there's an answer, but that's kind of where I am on the issue. Thank you for the allowance to get into comment quickly, but I'll stop there for now. Thanks, Joe.
Thanks, Mike. Chris Batsavage?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Hannah, for the presentation. Guess a couple questions, and one I guess is more of a basic question, but maybe this may help get a better idea of just the degree of non-reporting. Do we have any information from private anglers who target tilefish of how many trips they typically take per year? This is a very weather conditioned fishery, being pretty far offshore. It's probably depends on getting people, getting a crew together to go, because they're not cheap trips. So I don't know if we have an idea on just the general rate of participation in this fishery. And I ask that more so than maybe some other fisheries is, this is a pretty specialized fishery. There might be some casual anglers, but they're going with some pretty dedicated, boat owners, as opposed to some other fisheries that are, a wider group of folks might participate. So I'll stop there and see if you have any answer to that. And I have a second question regarding collecting length information, part of the addendum. Thanks, or framework. Thanks.
Yeah, so I don't think we have an idea necessarily about like the average number of tilefish trips people take a year. it gets a little complicated too, because there are some people that maybe go out and specifically target tilefish, but then there's this whole other group of anglers that really are going out there targeting HMS, maybe striking out or only catching a couple tuna, and they want to make the most out of their trip. And so on the way in, they're stopping in tilefish grounds to deep drop and get some extra fish before they return to port. So there's two components there and two types of anglers there that we're dealing with.
Yeah, thanks for that.
I just want to add one more comment, and she's right. It's very difficult for us. We have no information. However, we have advisory panel members that they tell us that they go up there a couple of times a year. But not only that, they also indicated to us that they see a lot of people fishing for tilefish out there quite a bit. So again, it's very difficult to put a number on that, but it seems to be that it's very prevalent.
Yeah, thanks. That's the other number, just the total number of people, not only how many times a year they may possibly go. Second, I appreciate that. Second question regarding the option for collecting length information, and we are, trying to improve this reporting mandatory reporting system to get more people to do it. But the more you add, the less likely they'll do it. Is it possible for certain aspects of reporting to be optional or desired as opposed to mandatory? Would there be any value in that as opposed to coming up with a separate data collection program for collecting things that are outside of this permit requirement? Thanks.
Yeah, I mean, if the council's interested in doing so, I think we have that flexibility. That wouldn't be anything that we would work through the framework. That would be a separate issue, because if it is optional, it wouldn't have to go into the regulations. So that's something we could do through a citizen science program, for example, and we can explore all those options if there's interested and come back to the council with some ideas.
Thanks. And that could possibly, if the council wanted to do it, be included in that app that has the mandatory reporting field. So it's kind of all housed under one area. Okay, thanks.
Thanks, Chris. Skip?
Also, Hannah, how many of the charter boats that are for hire and head boats that have federal permits that do have mandatory reporting, and the charter boats are all basically on the same lines as the private boats? They're really not running designated tilefish trips. They're out there tuna fishing and marlin fishing, and then when the fishing's slow, everybody stops and tile fishes. The head boats, as far as I know, are the only ones that actually run designated tilefish trips. How many of those boats are actually reporting?
Yeah, I think it's, I don't have the number off the top of my head. It's definitely more than 2 or 4%, which is what the private recreational percentage is. It might depend on golden versus blue line, but I would guess maybe 10 to 20%. But that's a guess. I can get that number for you later, though.
Chris?
Thank you. Just thinking through if we go forward with this and how we're collecting the data. A couple states I know, especially with us, we've got carcass collection programs, marine sportfish collection project for Virginia. Tilefish has almost always been on that program to collect the carcasses so we can do the aging work and everything and get the biological data that we can from the carcass. Would it be a possibility if going forward this, depending on how the reporting system is built, let's say they're noting they're landing in Virginia, it could pop up, hey, you can donate through this program and we can link it. So maybe they can, for awareness, if nothing else, if they don't realize it's out there in Virginia, it's another way of getting some rewards as well, because we tie awards to our donations. But just, is that something we might be able to incorporate? So maybe we can push people towards some of the biological data that we're trying to collect that we're probably not getting either.
Yeah, I'm not aware of any council-driven carcass donation programs, but for Blue Line, I know, Old Dominion, thank you, Jose. Old Dominion implemented a carcass donation program, and that's how we got our average size weight multiplier that we use to convert numbers of tilefish to pounds of tilefish. So it's definitely something we can explore, and we could work with partners to try to get something like that done. But
When you say Old Dominion, you mean Virginia?
yes.
Old
so-
Dominion University?
Yes, yes.
Okay, that's actually VMRC's aging lab.
Okay.
All right.
Okay, a few more hands. I'll go to Bobby and then Rich.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. To touch on a point that Mike Luisi spoke of, and I think he's 100% right. I mean, this is a 100% mandatory optional program. So, and until we have, and unless there's some way to either incentivize, participation or penalize for lack of participation, I don't really see it changing. But the issue I see is, tilefish it's a data poor stock, and what information we're getting from the commercial sector, which is only 23% of the TAC.
27%. That's for bluefish, though, or blue line.
Well, we're speaking for blue line. So you're trying to base a lot of information off of a small aspect of the stock itself. In the last decade, the amount of pressure that's been put on this fishery from the rec side has, it's ballooned up tremendously. I may be a little jaded from the commercial side because I was never given the option to opt out of reporting. I don't have any, I just don't have that luxury. I do like the idea of the reporting and maybe scale it back, but have optional fields that if people want to put in extra information, it's not necessary, but it's certainly a field is there. But we can't do accounting, and we can't hold people accountable if we can't count. And just because people don't want to participate now is not a good reason to say, we tried, we'll come back in a few years and maybe we can try it again. I mean, there may be a different approach to it, but, and honestly, I have no idea what the proper mechanism would be to either incentivize or penalize to be able to kind of force the issue of the participation. But, the vast majority of people, even if the ones that are aware of it, they're also aware that nothing reflects back to them if they decide not to do it. So I think if we can kind of come up with a way that either sweetens the deal for them or sours it if they don't, then I hate to be that way, but I think that's kind of the road we're going to have to go down.
I appreciate that. And I have a couple hands, but, it made me think, and I know Hannah touched on this, but just, in consideration for moving forward, folks should be thinking about, like, do we want to pick a preferred alternative as we move forward? So that's something to think about. We had a couple more hands, but I do want to say, I've kind of been involved in this since the beginning, and I feel like it's a unique situation. I talked to a lot of South Atlantic folks. I was part of the CDAR process for Blue Line at one point. You have rare event species, meaning they're not intercepted often in pulse fisheries. And in a lot of instances, you have unbelievable MRIP estimates that result in, 2-day seasons. With Blue Line, it's a unique situation where we see social media posts of tens of thousands of fish being caught and MRIP estimates at zero catch, let alone zero harvest, zero catch it in years. So any number to some extent would have been better than no number. I had hopes, since there is a tie-in with HMS, that reporting would have been somewhat more similar to the HMS, but even there, after decades and very specialized fishery, you see still low compliance. I don't think it's much above 50, if it's even at 50% compliance. But it is something that you can scale and use. I had hopes that we could get there, but Bobby, and all council members, if we are thinking about the idea of perhaps paring this down, I would ask that we consider, give consideration to, do we want a preferred alternative? I'll go to Rich, and then I see Michelle online.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And thanks, Mike. Well, thank you, staff, for the presentation. Thanks, Mike, for opening this discussion up with that question. should we continue this or not? I mean, I think it's pretty clear that it'd be a mistake to end this here. We can't manage these species without recreational information and data. And we're not that, to throw up our hands and walk away from this, it's a mistake. Because I think there are some good options here to pare down to reduce the burden on the anglers. I guess my question would be for staff. So do you think 4.4 will be adequate to ensure or enforce compliance? And I'll follow up with another question.
I think it would definitely help with enforceability because it does produce an electronic record that law enforcement, if they pull them over, they can actually check it against what they have in their cooler. But 4.4 and 4.5 in combination really improves the enforceability and matches the original intent of how this was laid out through Amendment 6.
Right, and also, so if I agree, I just wanted to get that on the record. I think that would help in enforceability, and that would address, Bobby's, really insightful comment prior to this one. If it's mandatory optional, it kind of addresses that. But from a stock assessment perspective, even if we can still use the information such as length, if not everybody is reporting. That information is really quite important. I brought that up at the last meeting. So I would continue to support, what was it, 4.3 to have length as an added field, but I would also remove the weight, any kind of required weight reporting. It's just impractical. And it could be an optional field, maybe. We talked about optional fields, but adding that in with that sub alternative is automatically going to color that alternative in a way, and that the people, when we get public input, no one's going to select that. Thank you.
Michelle?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So Chris Bassavage asked my question about, voluntary reporting elements and if those could be included in the app if they're, obviously not moving forward here. And I also think that having length be an optional field as well as chart information. I mean, those are things that I would suggest be part of optional fields. I'm thinking about, the South Atlantic Deepwater Longline Survey, which I think the SSC had a presentation on that earlier this year. And maybe just a quick question for Hannah and Jose. My assumption is that is continuing, that survey will continue. And so if there are, if chart information is a voluntary data element that could be included, that could help inform, future strata for that survey, or at least, strata modification, just, given our changing ocean conditions. So I'd support that. And then also agree with all the remarks that have come before this with respect to, let's try to optimize what we have here. I wouldn't be in favor of quitting this. Like Joe, we were both in the same room during the start of, the entire blue line tilefish, CDAR process. So I think this really is incredibly important, having seen some of those MRIP estimates. And then I guess, one of the things that caught my eye in there was, potentially a more targeted biological portside sampling. And I would certainly be supportive of us considering that. It just seems like, the resources for that are pretty slim. So it seems like there need to be some coordinated efforts, among the states with maybe council support. I don't see support from coming through the agency, just given the tight purse strings there as well. So I'm all in favor of continuing this program, but, cutting out the reporting elements as suggested, and moving a few of those to voluntary through the app.
Lori?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I too go along with keeping this in motion and not dropping it. I think we should think we're doing better than we are with this whole effort because, you know, the focus is, oh, there's 1,400 permits on the street, there's 1,000 permits on the street, and we're only getting X number of reports, which are so small. It's an open access permit. And yesterday we heard that the for hire sector, 22% of the permits are reporting landings. So all that means is 78% of them are latent effort, right? They don't go fishing. It doesn't mean they're not reporting. It means they're not fishing. That's how open access permits go. I think if you look the whiting fishery, any of these open access permits, there's a lot of them on the street compared to how many are actually participating in the fishery. And I think we have the exact thing going on here with the recreational permit. Everybody just checks the box and gets it, and this way they have it. I think streamlining the list is absolutely appropriate. And I agree with adding the length. You know, every stock assessment process we go through, the length is what the head stock man is begging for. You know, the big fear now with the portside sampling, the reduction in the portside sampling with golden tilefish, you know, is, oh my gosh, if we get too few samples, the model could collapse kind of thing. So the lengths are very important in the stock assessment process with this fishery. So, I mean, I think if we're going to go down the road to choose a preferred, do we work with what's there and just add or subtract to that one right now? I mean, like if we wanted to add the lengths, we make a motion to add the lengths, not as a voluntary, even as a mandatory, and start plucking away at it. I hope we don't drop it. I'll say that.
Okay, yeah, actually, it's a good question. I'll actually turn to staff to kind of walk us back through, you know, they are going to be looking for a motion. So what they have presented, or, you know, interest, if a motion comes, that any modifications to what was presented today. So I don't know, Hannah, if you could kind of.
Yeah, so if you guys want to go as far as set preferred alternatives, I think that would be something that we could either, if there's clear on the record, preferred, I think that'd be fine, but we could add it to the motion. I think that'd be the most transparent way. If there are certain things that you want to see, like, let me go to alternative 4.2, if there's certain shuffle and buffle of how you want to see this table laid out, like if you want to see depth, for example, added to the fields to maintain, maybe just clear on the record, that's what you guys want and that's the intent, or included in the actual motion, that would be helpful. Go ahead, Jose.
Yeah, to just further on this, my suggestion, given all the information that Hannah just presented, and the fact that people are just not providing the information, to really simplify this to the maximum extent possible. I will say, in talking to Paul Nishke at the Northeast Fisheries Science Center, yeah, it will be fantastic to have the length data, the weight data. That will be very good. However, people are just not providing that's actually going to complicate a little bit more what we're requiring. So I think that bringing this down, if it was me sitting where you are and making a vote, I will say it will be better to just get the count of the fish, and then the other data fields that have been indicated that they will be good to have it as an optional reporting requirement. And that will keep us along with the executive order that is supposed to be reducing burden on the fishermen and things like that. So I think that keeping this simple And then perhaps in the future, once people get used to this, we can potentially expand on what is being required.
Follow up, Larry?
Thank you. So Jose, I'm just curious, so like no vessel name, no permit number, no how many anglers are on the boat, no, I mean, the date you sailed, maybe, I don't know. I mean, you're streamlining it down to basically letter O, count of individual golden and blue lines landed, or are there other things added to that?
I think what Jose was referring to is streamline it to what is currently laid out in this green box on the slide. So you would maintain the things that identify who the fisherman is, who the vessel is. We would keep things like trip type, so we know if it's a private recreational trip, a commercial trip, or whatever. Date and time, the number of anglers, that helps us analyze possession limits, and then the count of the actual individual golden and blue line landed and discarded. So that's what Jose is referring to. But I did want to ask maybe if there is interest in these optional fields, maybe the service can weigh in how we should capture that, because if they're optional, it's not something that would go into the regulation. So I'm just not sure how exactly to handle that.
Mike?
Yes, I think you're right. I don't think we would do anything with the regs if we're talking about optional fields. I think that would be something to work out with the vendors who provide the, the apps that people use, and they could have supplemental fields. I think we would still need to be involved in that, because we would need to make sure that we have a way to receive those data. And then the Fish Online, the apps that we control, we'd want to make sure that we're providing consistent opportunities for those supplemental data as well. But I don't think it would affect the regulatory process, because we wouldn't obviously add those to the regs. I guess while I have the mic, though, given the subalternative 4.2, has there been discussion about why time sailed and time landed is necessary versus simply the date? Because I think that's a way we could simplify some things as well.
Yeah, I mean, that can definitely be removed from this list. The thought process behind maintaining those, it just gives us an idea of, how long they're going out for. It might provide insight on if it's a Tilefish directed trip or an HMS directed trip. And it was just something that Paul Nitschke highlighted when we were having these conversations with him. And it could give some insight on effort in general, but probably unlikely.
Okay, I still have some hands around the table. Maureen, and then I'll go back to Rich.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Aside from our concerns concerning the low level of reporting that we have, I'm also concerned about the level of reliability of the data that we'll be collecting. Apparently, some managers might not be comfortable with the reliability of the data that our recreational fishermen will be submitting. This is similar to the data that's submitted by party and charter boats. There's no way for us to check the reliability of that data, because with the commercial fishermen, we can compare the dealer reports. There's nothing that we can check for party and charter boats. And so are we comfortable with the reliability of the data that we will be getting from people who seem to be reluctant to report in the first place?
I'm going to take that as a rhetorical. But I had Rich's hand, Rich. Lori,
Thank
do you have a
you, Mr. Chair.
follow-up?
Just following up with Mike Pentney's comment suggestion, I would definitely remove the time sailed and time, date time landed. And again, and to address the, not to belabor the point, but to address Jose's comments about burden, every angler has had to deal with size limits, and they measure their fish. I mean, it's just a common. We all have to do that when we're fishing. It's not a burden to ask for length measurements. Thanks.
Lisa?
Thank you, Chairman. To back Lori's statement up about accountability, what if they had to file a report going out? Just initially file that they're intending to go out to get tilefish. And then if they came in and they hadn't filed a report and law enforcement saw they had a tilefish, there would be a penalty. Thank you.
Question to staff on hail in, hail out type.
We haven't considered hailed in or hailed out requirements. Subalternative 4.4, like they would have, under that subalternative, they would have to start a report as soon as they started catching tilefish. So maybe that gets at some of what you're saying. We don't currently require a hail in or hail out for, I don't even think any of our for hire fisheries in the Mid-Atlantic region. But yeah.
Paul?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a couple of points. I do think it would be a mistake to let this go for several reasons. Reporting is getting better. It's, my mother always used to say, it's coming along, right? So it's coming, she said that until she died. So maybe that's not a good thing to use here, but it is coming along. And if we make this easier, the people that are reporting are going to be a little more consistent. And I think a few more people are going to join in. To Maureen's point, I think the reluctant people just aren't reporting. That's, I mean, the people that are reporting, I think, are being nice about it. But Mike was right about just the day, you know, maybe time sail doesn't matter, but the day you sailed, because most of these people aren't doing it more than a day or 36 hours. So they're small boats. And another point, these aren't 80-foot boats. These are 25-foot, 40-foot boats. I like the idea of length. And if we want to pursue that, even if we don't do it right away, one consideration down the road is not to ask them to get on their knees and wrestle with a fish with a tape, is just get 2 or 3 categories for each species, under a certain size, a mid-size, and a larger size. Then they could just look at it and say, this is the middle range, this is the small range, this is the large range. That's a nice starting point to get some data out of it. And then if we could also encourage states to collect for whatever they get out of it. So I mean, some people just like to participate, and filling out a report, a lot of them don't think they're getting anything done. But given a piece of a fish that's getting analyzed, I think they feel like they really are contributing, and that's going to get a lot more people on board in the process. Thank you.
Thanks, Paul. Yeah, and as far as lengths too, I know we're hoping that they would come in on a particular app, but there is an app for that as far as capturing lengths just using your phone. So I think, you know, that's another discussion, but I saw Mike Pentney's hand up, and then we do have some folks from the public that want to comment.
Yeah, so I guess 2 things. So one, I said about, do we care about the time? And that may actually be irrelevant. I think one of the things that, we should be thinking about is how we leverage the technologies that are available. How can we leverage those technologies in a way to address some of these things? So on the one hand, saying that we're requiring them to report the time they sailed sounds like a burden. But if what they're doing is hitting start trip on an app, and that's automatically recording the date and the time and the location, we're not really making much of a burden. And so I think, and with respect to the question about initiating a trip hail, that might be as simple as saying they have to initiate the trip on the EVTR before they leave port. So that way they're just hitting a start trip button on the way out of port or out of the harbor, and that's initiating the trip, is telling the start date and time, and the port sailed. And then if at some point during the trip enforcement were to say, did you initiate a tilefish trip, there would be evidence. Either yes, they did, and they could show that they had a trip, they're in the middle of a trip on their EVTR, or no, in which case they could potentially be that could potentially be a violation. So I think we just, as we engage in these conversations, think about what the technologies allow us to do to mitigate some of these so-called burdens.
Follow up to that, Hannah?
Yeah, I guess thinking about that is just keeping in mind, if that is something of interest, some of these trips are really HMS trips. So when you start a Tilefish trip, at what point does it become a Tilefish trip? Is it when you leave the dock, even though you're targeting HMS species, and, oh, wait, I didn't catch any, so I'm going to catch some tilefish? Does it become a tilefish trip when you make that decision on the water? So it's just, I just caution that we think through all of these different dynamics associated with this fishery before making decisions like that.
Thanks. Maureen?
Thank you. Question for Mike. Is there any chance that we can get law enforcement on the water to encourage them to report?
So two-part answer. One is we'll have to talk to law enforcement. I think, they set their own priorities, and they have their own resource constraints. And so I think, the best course of action would, I think, for the council to directly engage with the law enforcement representatives, maybe listening in, but if not, we'll certainly I expect to be on the call tomorrow for their report. But the second piece of that should be the council thinking about, if they are going to ask the Office of Law Enforcement to prioritize recreational tilefish, what would they not prioritize? So, I mean, with a fixed amount of resources, what are you asking them to not enforce? And that's, I think, going to be the challenge.
Skip?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As far as law enforcement goes, the only ones that are out there enforcing anything is the Coast Guard. They're out there, doing the tuna fish. They're the only ones I've ever seen out there 50, 60, 70 miles doing any kind of enforcement. So Josh would be the one to ask.
To echo Mike, that we would just have to prioritize other things and not prioritize something else. It's not possible to prioritize tilefish at the detriment to something else, but that'd be a consideration I'd bring back to my office, and we'd figure something out.
You have a follow-up, Skip?
So when you're out there checking the charter boats for tuna fishing and whatever, can't that be on the list of, if you see tilefish, and find out if they're a for-hire boat or if they're a complete private boat? Because the private boats are the ones really that we're talking about, not really the charter boats.
Correct. That'd just be something else we check. Correct.
Okay. There are a couple members of the public, and I'll let them comment. But in the interest of time, I wanted to just remind everybody that although we are interested in whether or not folks wanted to keep in or take out alternatives, I do not want us to get too far into the weeds on some of the details of this. So I asked Chris to kind of give us an overview of where we are and where we're going to, where we're going with this.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think Hannah said this. This isn't the final framework meeting, right? So this is the second one, but we're going to have another one. So keep that in mind. Also keep in mind that you do not have to pick a preferred alternative today, right? We can wait until the final framework meeting, pick that preferred alternative. What's really good is hearing the discussion today, because what's happening is that Hannah, Jose, and Mary will take the conversation that we have, refine the alternatives that are currently in the framework, and then present that, with consideration at the final framework meeting. So I think that captures where we're at. Again, we don't want to get too far down the rabbit hole of trying to figure out a preferred alternative today, because you don't have to, right? So keep that in mind. Thanks.
Okay, around the table, I see two hands. I see, I'm going to go to Sunny and then Mike Louisi. Sonny, if you're speaking, we can't hear you. All right, Sonny, I'm going to go to Mike, and then I'll come back and see if we can get your mic working.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Would do my best Sonny impersonation, but I don't know the crowd would like that too much. I'm asking you, do we need, based on what Chris said, do we need a motion to move this forward at this time? I'd be willing to make one, kind of approving the range of alternatives as presented today with modifications. If you need something like that to move it forward, we can start there. Okay. So, do you want me to make that motion now or hold?
Let's hold till, yeah, but thank you, Mike. I appreciate that. Yeah, that'll keep us going. Sonny, do you want to give it another try? Oh, his hands down. I'm going to go to the audience quickly. Kate Wilkie, you had your hand up, and then we'll go to Jim Fletcher.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, for taking public comment on this. Kate Wilkie with the Nature Conservancy. I hope that the council will continue to move forward with this framework action. I support the alternatives presented today for revisions to simplify the reporting data and the other requirements. These deep water species aren't well represented in the MRIP sampling, and so therefore we have not the greatest data. The council has significant investment in developing this program, in conducting the program review, and now in developing these alternatives to this point. I think simplifying to the bare bones is a good start, and other data fields could be optional. And I wonder if there's lessons to be learned from other reporting programs, such as in the Gulf, to inform us on which data fields are most palatable for folks. In addition to this council action to streamline the reporting process, I think that the council should invest in a communications and outreach strategy to convey the importance and potential benefits to anglers of getting better data for this fishery. And that could help to build support and the willingness to report, and it could also help with Maureen's concern about reliability. And then just finally, the issue of poor or limited recreational data isn't unique to our region, and I think other regions are watching what the MID is doing on this action. So I hope that we can continue to make progress here. Thanks.
Great, thank you, Kate. Thanks for bringing up the Gulf. I feel like a broken record. I was afraid to do it again myself. We'll go to Jim Fletcher.
Thank you, sir. For 10 years or more, the United National Fishermen's Association has asked for electronic reporting from the recreational fisheries. This is an example. If we had electronic reporting for everybody fishing in the EEZ, we would not be having this discussion. For 10 years or more, I have brought up the fact that Bluefin Data, who is the same company that the commercial fishing industry has to report through, has had an app for recreational reporting. Now, my question to the council is, when are you going to require or be forced to utilize what the Magnuson Act requires? The Magnuson Act said in the original equal or comparative data reporting. We've not gotten to it in 50 years. So my question to you is, do you want a solution to the problem which Bluefin Data offers, or do you still want to continue to talk about the project? And if you can tell I'm frustrated on this issue, you're correct. Thank you for your time. James Fletcher, United National Fishermen's Association.
Thank you, Jim. And now we're going to begin the triple mic maneuver. So we got two members of the public, Mike Wayne and Mike Peartnock, and then we're going to bring it back to the table where Mike Louisi is going to give us a motion. So Mike Wayne, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just wanted to offer to the council that we have several media members that we could easily connect with to try to help enhance the outreach and education component of the reporting. And as an association, we think, like some of the other council members have mentioned, like there's no point in just abandoning this because it's challenging. This is something that we need to continue to work on. So just wanted to offer some assistance from the outreach perspective. Thanks.
Thank you, and I appreciate the offer. Mike Pierduck?
Thank you, Mike Pierdock, Stowwagon Bank Charter Boat Association. I wanted to mention that there is a project going on up in New England, the Recreational Biological Sampling Project. The select captains from the Stowwagon Bank Charter Boat Association, as well as Rhode Island Charter Boat Captains Association, are collecting length and DNA data associated with cod and winter flounder. This has been a significant success. And there has been those that participate and happy to participate in such. But this could be something that you could consider to use at your end for these other species that are being mentioned. One thing that is difficult, though, that I found out through the process is that you can collect the length data. You take a photograph of the length, you take a DNA sample, and then it goes off site. But there's a whole process to go through with the ACCSP to actually accept that data. And that project is accepted, and the data can be used for fishery management purposes. One last thing is this is where I had hoped for, whether it's a letter of authorization or any other mechanism to help those want to participate by getting a season or a bag limit a little bit more, because they're participating in the data collection process. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. I think those are all very useful public comments. I appreciate that. So back to the table, and Mike Louisi, if you can get us started with a motion.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So based on the discussion and the comments that were made about potentially selecting a preferred alternative, at this point, I don't feel comfortable with that. I think I'd rather hear from the stakeholders first. I would move to approve the range of alternatives for the recreational tilefish permitting and reporting framework as presented and modified today.
Okay, thank you, Mike. I have a second by Joe Grist. Discussion on the motion? Okay, not seeing any. I'll ask the question. Oh, go ahead, Rich.
I'm just curious. So you mentioned you didn't want input on details on this necessarily. When you mentioned you want to limit the discussion away from the specific details of this report, but is this saying that this is as written, this will go to the public for public input as written here?
So as presented and modified today means that the staff will go back, capture the conversation in the next draft, and bring that draft to the council for consideration at the next, I don't know if it's in, what do we plan on, Hannah? February or April for this?
April.
April. So at the April meeting, we'll be looking at a final framework document for council input and possible approval.
Thank you.
Yeah, just while I have the mic, just for sake of clarity, we heard a lot of discussion about adding length and or weight, and a lot of discussion about maybe not adding weight, so maybe just length. So I'm seeing some head nods. So I'm assuming this motion implies that length would be maintained in this document and we would take out the option for adding weight.
So close. So we had a conversation about length being like an optional deal, right? So we need to capture that. So it's not the same as date sailed, it's a different category. So we'll capture that, and then in the next alternative set that we bring to the council.
Yeah, and if I mean, just thinking about what the RA said is that, if we wanted to even capture voluntary information within the same reporting apps, we need to have that discussion of, are those reporting apps capable of taking that information in? Okay, all right, very good. Okay, so I'll call the question on the motion. Is there any objection to the motion? Not seeing any abstentions? None. Okay, so we'll consider that passed by unanimous consent. Let's take a break. We're going to come back at 3 to go over the 2026 implementation plan, and I'll turn it over to Chris. Got a lot of important discussions there, so I am going to hold us to that, and I'm going to start right at 3. Thank you.
Can anybody hear me?
Yep, we can hear you, Sonny.
All right, 2-minute warning, folks.
Checking my audio. Thank you.
Yep. All right, we're getting closer, folks, but let's everyone find their seats. And for those of you in the back of the room, I don't think they could hear us. I know. All right, we're going to get started here. Wow, it's amazing. Yeah, all right, thanks to Scott. Oh, wasn't he? Okay. Oh, thank you, Stephen. Okay, there we go. Yeah, that beat the gavel. All right, well, thank you, everyone. Horseshoes, hand grenades, and returning on time. As close is going to have to be good enough here. So we're a little after 3. We're going to get into very, very important discussion on the 2026 implementation plan for the mid and I will be turning it over to the Executive Director, Chris Moore.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good afternoon, everyone. So for the next hour and a half or so, we're going to be talking about a couple of things. Most importantly, the singular objective for our meeting this afternoon is to review and consider approval of the 2026 implementation plan. So I think everyone's aware of that. Remember, for the folks that haven't been involved with implementation plan conversations before, the implementation plan describes very specific fishery management actions, deliverables, and other activities that we plan for the upcoming year, this time being 2026. We've been doing implementation plan stuff for 12 years, I think. As long as Mary's been with the council, a little bit, right? 12 years. So speaking of Mary, she's going to be helping me with the slides this afternoon. We have about 35 slides, so I'll try not to sound like Charlie Brown's teacher as we go through 35 slides. So anyway, let's talk about what we plan to do today outside of just this focus on the 2026 implementation plan. So one of the in terms of the overview, Mary, I think you have that slide. There you go. So in terms of the overview, we'll be talking about the purpose of the implementation plan. I'll quickly go through the 2025 activities, just as a reminder of all the things that we got done this year. And then we'll get to the meat of today's meeting, which is the proposed 2026 implementation plan. So as I said, basically what we hope to accomplish today is get approval for a draft or review the draft and then approve a final document for the council. So the purpose of the implementation plan, very quickly, it creates a link between the 5-year strategic plan and the council's annual activities. Remember, for folks that may have forgotten, we do have a strategic plan. This is our third 5-year strategic plan that started last year. And the importance of the strategic plan is it guides our activities. It guides it through the implementation plan. As important, or maybe more importantly, the implementation plan is a tool. So it's a planning tool. So it allows us to plan, like we're doing at today's meeting, allows us to track our progress throughout the year, and then report out at the end of the year to see how well we did. Next. So what I'm going to do first is go through the 2025 end of the year updates. So this is going to be a quick review. Remember, this is the second meeting that we've had relative to the implementation plan. Our first meeting was in October with the executive committee. So I've already gone through these end of the year updates with the executive committee. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time on them. But what I do plan to do is go through them. And then at the once we're done with those, I'm going to stop, see if there's any questions, and then move on to the 2026 stuff. Next slide. Catch up here. So in terms of 2025, these are all council actions that we were involved with or currently involved with, including completing the recreational measures setting process framework and addendum, the dogfish accountability measures and specifications framework. We had an action on Atlantic mackerel that you can see there, an action on sector separation that we continue to talk about. That's in progress. The EFH amendment that we've talked about before, that's still in progress. We just had the conversation about Tilefish permitting and reporting. And finally, we talked about the alternative gear marking framework. Next. And by the way, that's postponed. I think, folks, if you saw the slide, regret that that's postponed. Staff have significant involvement in stock assessments. So we've had in 2025 research track assessments for longfin squid that we've been involved with. Then there's the management track assessments that we've also been involved with. Next. Bunch of specifications this year, like every year. So you go down the list and look at the years that we have specifications set for fluke and scup and sea bass and bluefish and tilefish and squids, mackerel, even chub mackerel. Still care about chub mackerel. Julie and about 2 other people care about chub mackerel, but we do care about chub mackerel. Spiny dogfish and monkfish. Next. Those in terms of reviews, so we set specifications, we also review specifications. Here are the reviews that we did 2025, tilefish, butterfish, squid, surf clam, quahog. Next. So we also get involved in other stuff. So we need, as we think about 2026, we need to set aside a little bit of time, staff resources to do some of these other things that pop up. So these are the other things that popped up in 2025, including a white paper on sector-specific OFLs and ABCs for summer flounder, scup, and black sea bass. Staff worked with the SSC on that. Remember that we responded to the executive order 14276 and submitted a document in September on that. We have 8 Inflation Reduction Act projects that we're currently involved with, continue involvement with. And we started planning for the 50th anniversary of MSA. So all significant projects and or initiatives. Next. Also, we get involved in significant science and research activities relates to council-supported projects, including one related to squid length-based assessment, one associated with longfin squid biological sampling, spiny dogfish aging. We were involved with a surf clam and ocean quahog electronic monitoring project. We're currently trying to finish up. We're hoping that the sturgeon bycatch reduction projects can be finished up here in December, and also involved with a regional industry-based survey pilot project. Next. Bunch of comment letters. You can look at the list there, see a variety of topics. Here's some more. Wind. We spent a lot of time developing comment letters, a lot of letters on wind. Again, there's a list. And I'll stop there. So for the folks that are online, or even you folks sitting around the table, this PowerPoint presentation is going to be posted. So I'm zipping through this 25 stuff again because we've already reviewed it. But I'll stop here, see if there's any questions, the comments about 2025. Busy year, very busy year. Okay, anything online? Still see anything? Okay, so let's move on. Mary. So this is what we have proposed for 2026. And I think what I'll do is go through these and stop where I think it might be, where we might have some questions, and then get through the rest of them. So the first set of species is summer flounder, scup, black sea bass. The list here includes reviewing the 2027 specifications for those species. Remember that we've set those, we've already been involved with those, but we need to review them. So we do that, we do these reviews every year. We'll also be reviewing our recreational management measures for the 3 species. We will have the advisory panel fishery performance reports that we have every year, so staff will be facilitating those. We hope that we complete the rec sector separation amendment. So, keep your fingers crossed. We'll see. Based on the conversation yesterday, it may be something that takes us into 2027. So you may see that again next year. We will complete a white paper on improvements to recreational data collection and use. Remember, that's something that we agreed to when we talked about this, the rec amendment, separating that out from the other stuff. So we're going to plan on that. The other thing that we're going to do is related to something that was on our EO list as well, is conduct the scup winter 1 quota period landings threshold analysis and consider initiating management action. And then finally, review outcomes of the scup gear restricted areas project, consider initiating a framework to modify scup gear restricted areas. And that also is one of the things that we included in that EO list. So there's usually a lot of interest in these 3 species, so I'll stop, see if there's any questions about any of that. Pretty straightforward. Okay, moving on, Mary. Bluefish, couple things there, 3 things there. Review the specs. So we've set the specs for 2027. We're going to review those. We'll have our advisory panel fishery performance report, and then the number 4 and 5 that you saw for summer flounder, scup, and black sea bass will apply to to Bluefish as well as we address those recreational management issues. Next. So a lot of Tilefish stuff here. We actually have to develop specifications for Blue Line. So this is 2027 to 2029. Remember the conversations that we've had about Blue Line Tilefish and basically working with the South Atlantic Council on those specifications. We agreed with the South Atlantic Council that we'd form a Tilefish committee to address the issues that came up earlier this year. So we'll be looking at those next year. We'll be reviewing the 27 specifications for golden tilefish. We'll have advisory panel fishery performance reports. We just had the conversation about the tilefish reporting framework. So that'll happen hopefully in April, as we just discussed. The number 14 is dependent upon our budget. So if in fact we have the resources to do this, we'll coordinate and support the 2026 Golden Tilefish Survey. So that's something that we've supported for a number of years. That survey has become very important to the golden tilefish assessment. So I hope that we do in fact get the money to do that and support that survey again. Likewise, that last one, that expansion of the South Atlantic Deepwater Longline Survey into the Mid-Atlantic waters, that's another survey that we've supported for a number of years. We hope to be able to support that again in 2026. And again, that survey has become very important to the assessment of blue line tilefish. So those two, 14 and 15, are budget dependent. And I should say, as an aside, in terms of budget and resources, what I'm presenting to you today assumes that we'll get at least level funding for 2026, right? The budget for the councils, for the Mid-Atlantic Council, still uncertain, but I'm hoping that we're level funded. With level funding, I'll be able to accomplish all the things that we're talking about today. Okay. With level funding, we'll also continue to have the staff resources available to do all the things we're talking about today. So, which is a good thing. One of the things that I always say, and apparently this is Matt Seeley's favorite part of the implementation plan conversation, is that what you see in front of you today is a full plate. This is based on everything that I can tell at this point in time. This is as much as we can do in 2026, right? So I don't want to overpromise and say, oh yeah, we could do that too. We could do that too. Because when we get to the end part, the end of the year, and start reviewing everything that we said we were going to do, and there's multiple things on the list that we didn't get done, it doesn't look good. So, right. So from a realistic, just my evaluation of where we're at in time and where we're at with everything that we need to consider, this is a full plate. And I say that because there may be folks around the table that have another idea that they want to include for 2026. And when we start talking about other ideas, unless they're minor tweaks or something that's really not that significant, we're going to have to go back and look at some of the things that we'd have to take off the list. Okay, so keep that in mind as we go through this. Before I continue, any questions or comments about golden and blue lines or anything that I just said? Yeah, Jim.
Thanks. Just a curiosity. So if you don't get level funding and you actually had a reduction, the revision process for this, are you just something that you do? Because I don't think there would be a lot of time to bring this before it or whatever. So how would that work?
So I'm giving you a heads up on a couple things. We just talked about those tilefish surveys. Those would be taken off the list, right? And then as it became more complicated, then I would bring it to the council. We'd have a conversation. I'd have to, right? But it's one of those, how do they put it? Imaginary horribles, unimaginary horribles, something like that, right? So I'm assuming level funding. I'm a positive guy. I'm staying optimistic. That's what we're going to get. Mike Petney.
Yeah, thanks, Chris. Since you teed it up, I feel like I should say that while this is a very full plate and an optimistic, what you've put here in this document, set of tasks for the council, I think everybody's aware, but I'll just state it for the record anyway, that almost all of these actions require, participation and collaboration with Garfield Regional Office, Science Center, and we can't promise that we can fulfill all of the obligations that are set here. We will certainly do our best, but we are supporting the New England Council and its full plate. I think they ended up with 165% of their capacity for their ambitious 2026 list of priority actions, and as well as some actions and work that the Atlantic States Marine Fisheries Commission undertakes. And so this is a true partnership, and we look forward to working with the Mid-Atlantic Council and the Science Center on these actions, and we will certainly strive to meet the ambitious goals that Chris and the council is setting forward as we work through the rest of this list.
Thanks, Mike.
I do have a handout line now, Sunny.
I never go above 100%, just to let you know. That's as far as I'm going to go. Sonny, can you hear us?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yep, we can hear you. Go ahead.
Sorry, I'm not there with y'all today, but I think it's probably a better thing. And the question I had, Chris, was with this list, are you asking, or can we ask for any additions of anything on this implementation plan? Excuse me.
Yeah, so it's an open conversation. Once we get through the entire, I don't know what you're thinking about, Sonny, but depending on what it is, what I'd like to do is wait till we get to the very end and then go back and think about some of the things that we might add to various categories, if that works.
Yes.
Okay, great.
All
So
right.
we'll do that. Yeah. Okay. All right. Other questions or comments? Okay. Seeing none. Did you have?
No.
Okay. Squid, mackerel, butterfish. We have a good list there as well. We have developed the 2027, 2022, 2029 specs for longfin squid. Same for butterfish, same years. We'll be reviewing specifications for the other species. One of the things that we described in our EO response is to evaluate alternative trip limits for butterfish and solicit advisory panel input on other measures to increase butterfish quota utilization. So that's going to be a good conversation. Certainly, we've talked about that a little bit. We talked about it again as it relates to that EO or that executive order. Also evaluate and potentially develop a framework adjustment to allow in-season quota increase for ilex squid under certain conditions. And you can look at the briefing materials if you're interested in that. Facilitate development of advisory panel fishery performance report. And we do have, as I indicated earlier, a research track assessment for longfin squid, as well as a management track assessment for squid that we're going to support. Next item, or next group of species, surf clam and quahogs. Develop three things there. Develop 2027 to 2028 specifications for surf clam and ocean quahog. Also facilitate development of advisory panel fishery performance reports. And 25 is something, again, that we talked about as it relates to the executive order. Develop a white paper on surf clam quahog individual transferable quota program improvements. I'll stop there. Any questions about squid, mackerel, butterfish, surf clams, or quahogs? Okay, spiny dogfish, relatively straightforward. We will be reviewing 2027 specifications for spinies, also facilitating development of advisory panel fishery performance report for that particular species. As an aside, I do know that the New England Council considered spiny dogfish in their 2026 work plan, and wherever that takes them, because we're directly involved with spiny dogfish, will certainly be involved. I don't know, Ted, if you have any specifics that you want to talk about, or even, do you know what I'm talking about in terms of what the?
I'm actually at a bit of a loss. I thought you guys were leading on the dogfish.
We do, but there was an issue with spiny dogfish that came up at the New England Council meeting. Again, it's talking to Jason, I think it's a relatively minor issue, so it's not listed here as something that we would be directly involved with, but it was exploring some option within the spiny dogfish fishery that you guys are interested in. Yeah, Mike Benny.
It's it was the exemption area issue.
Oh,
that's part of the groundfish regs, and I don't think that made it into the priority list for 2026.
That's on a hold.
Okay.
Again.
Okay. Any questions about spiny dogfish? Okay, moving on. So, a number of things here related to ecosystem and ocean planning habitat. First, to complete that omnibus essential fish habitat amendment. Been working on that for several years, so it'd be great to get it done in 2026. Number 29 is something that came out of our conversations related to the executive order. So develop a white paper to review deep sea coral protection measures. So this is reviewing, not revising, for folks that might be getting excited because they see deep sea coral protection measures on this list. So this is just a white paper. It was a topic that Bobby brought up. You know, considering we haven't really looked at these things for over a decade, it's probably a good idea just to take a look and see if there's anything that we could do to either increase protection for deep sea corals or potentially, you know, look at some of the areas that we have there. So we'll see. It's a white paper. So not an action, just a white paper. The other one is to develop the 2026 ecosystem approach to fisheries management risk assessment report. That's something we do every year. Also review the 2026 Mid-Atlantic State of the Ecosystem report. Like we do every year, we'll be looking at an annual report on commercial landings of unmanaged species. That's something that we work with the service on. We'll continue to maintain and improve NERA products, Northeast Regional Habitat Assessment products. The other thing we'll be doing is tracking offshore wind development activities and developing comments as needed, and continue to manage the offshore wind web pages. Next, Mary. Science and research, go back. The other way. There you go. So science and research, we have three things here. Coordinate the Northeast Trawl Advisory Panel, NTAP. I think folks know all about that. Support the regional industry-based trawl survey, and review and approve scientific and statistical committee membership. So we have a couple openings on our SSC that we'll be looking at in early 26. Next, climate and governance. So these are the 8 Inflation Reduction Act funded projects that we've been talking about for a while now. We present a updated memo to you at every council meeting related to these projects. I'm not going to read those to you. Certainly you take a look and see if you have any questions about any of them. If you have been at the table for the last year or so, that you've seen these and heard about these. Next, climate and governance is the second page of that. Coordinate with the New England and South Atlantic councils on their IRA funded projects. So we have staff involved on their steering committees and some work groups as needed. We'll be doing that. Continue to participate on the East Coast Coordination Group and Core Team. Provide support for East Coast Coordination Group action items and 26 priorities, and participate on the Changing Ecosystems and Fisheries Initiative Regional Decision Support Team. I'll stop there. Any questions about any of that? It's an easy crowd this afternoon. What are you waiting for? Like the last slide? Is that going to like trigger like all sort of like, what? We're not doing it. Okay, well, we'll get there. We're getting there. So this slide, this is general. So we have a, I don't know if I'd call it a catch-all category, but it's just something that doesn't fit in any of the other categories that we have. So we've talked about the alternative gear marking framework and where we're at with that. So we'll hopefully complete that. Again, tied to the executive order, working with the New England Fishery Management Council, evaluate the vessel baseline restrictions and consider initiating an omnibus management action coordination with them. So that's a big deal. That's going to be an interesting project, and certainly, from my perspective, something that should be done. All right, and we've been talking about it for a number of years, so it's good that we finally have an opportunity to address it. One of the other white papers that we'll be looking at is one that evaluates potential modifications to multi-year specification frequencies for council FMPs. So remember, some specs we can set for multiple years, some not so much, right? And with changes in how stock assessments or the timing of stock assessments, we need to really think about what we can do to make the system more efficient and effective by doing maybe changing the multi-year specification frequency for some of those species. So we'll be looking at that. This 47 is something that we didn't think about when we met with the executive committee, but we got a big, there's a big deal that's going to happen with MRIP data in 26. So we're going to be reviewing revised MRIP fishing effort survey data, and considering if we need to do anything relative to commercial recreational allocations for summer flounder, skip, black sea bass, bluefish, or blue line tilefish, right? So that 47 probably might cause some aggravation, right, in terms of what that could mean. But I think it's fair to say, it's just realistic to know that once we have new recreational data, this is a topic that's going to come up, right? So we'll review it, and it'll probably be a white paper for us to look at that basically looks at what these could mean. One of the things that we've talked about, one of the things that staff does is respond to requests for information related to MSC certification audits for council managed species. So we'll continue to do that. More general stuff. Continue to track legislative issues as appropriate. Continue to work with the council coordination committee. Continue to work with the NRCC, the Northeast Region Coordinating Council. Participate on take reduction teams of protected resource working groups. There is a Hudson Canyon Sanctuary Advisory Council that meets, so participate on that. Also continue to track HMS, highly migratory species actions, develop comments as necessary, and also continue to develop comments on any relevant exempted fishing permit applications. Any questions there about all that stuff, general stuff? Lori first.
Thank you. I'll be back to 46. Yeah. So we're going to look at each species individually and decide if maybe 5 years would be an appropriate multi-year versus 2 or 3 that it might be in now, each species individually.
Yeah, that's one way to think about it, Lori. So I think for Goldens we have like what, 3? Yeah, 3. So it might be, we revisit that and say 3's appropriate. That's perfect. We may look at quahogs and say, right now, I can't remember exactly. I think it may be 5, maybe it should be more than 5, right? So I think it just opens it up to the idea that we may want to modify some of those just to be more efficient, right? And reflect where we're at. Chris?
Yeah, thanks, Chris. And yeah, good catch on reviewing the allocations based on the new FES estimates. I guess I'm kind of thinking ahead in terms of if people have other additions they want to add to the implementation plan. And as you said, we're already pretty fully committed, so some things might need to move down the list or be considered for 2027. I guess depending on the timing of the FES data and other priorities we have, is this something that either if it, I guess would it be best or better or possible, maybe possible is the word, to start this in 2027 if we find that there's other things that come up, and also just if the timing of this is delayed a bit due to this government shutdown and things like that.
Yeah, absolutely. So we put it here because we anticipate that we'll be getting that data June-ish, right? So maybe later, maybe a little bit later than June, right? If it's much later than June, then 2027 would be absolutely appropriate for this. So one way to deal with it is to leave it here. Another way to do it is to move it down to possible additions and just say, we're going to leave this in possible additions, and we'll only do it, obviously, if the timing's right. You know, so that may be the best way to handle it. So we'll make that change and incorporate that into the final draft. Other questions about general before we move on? Yes, Mike Benny.
So just flagging that this morning's discussion on black sea bass, but around the confidence intervals and our recreational data. I'm not sure if it fits under general or more specifically under the Scumber, Flounder, Scup, and Sea Bass FMP, but I think that work needs to be accounted for somehow.
So we will get to that. I promise. And still stay at 100%. So let's go to, let's see, what's next? Communication and outreach. Wait, before we do this, any other questions, comments before we move on? See any online? Okay. So next, communication and outreach. Mary's going to be very busy again in 2026. We have this big 50th anniversary that we're involved with. So there's two aspects to this. So it says plan and implement. It's actually, Mary is a principal, like the main principal from my perspective, in the CCC activity related to the 50th anniversary. So she is taking on a number of tasks related to that campaign. She's also working with Hayden and other staff to develop our campaign, right? So our 50th anniversary campaign will include a number of things. We've talked about those things in past meetings. We'll continue to talk about it as we roll into 2026, but there's a number of activities that are pretty cool, and I think you guys will like them. The next one is to conduct public outreach, develop communication products to support awareness of the council. That's something that we have on the list every year. Mary manages the council website, as well as folks may not be aware of this, but there's a joint council meeting calendar. So there's a calendar that includes all 8 regional councils that you can go to and see what folks are doing. Also continue to participate in MREP, which is Marine Resource Education Program. Jason is heavily involved in planning, and Mary's involved with outreach, so we continue to be involved with that. A number of you are going to be attending that MREP session here in January. So continue to support the program. It's a good program. It's certainly one that we want to continue to support. And then we also support and participate in NOAA Fisheries annual training course for newly appointed council members. So that's a requirement. We continue to be involved with that. We being principally Jessica, occasionally Jason. And that's it for communication outreach. Any questions about that? Okay. And then we have, so it's not like at the end of the year, everything just stops and everything that we said we we're going to do in 25 just kind of goes away. So there is wrap up on actions that take us into, will take us into 26, including that dogfish framework, the framework on mackerel, that we continue to wait for publication of the FR on circumland and ocean quag species separation requirements. I think that's hopefully going to happen soon. And then do anything we need to do to facilitate finishing up that specification packages that we've talked about and get those into GARFO for review. And now we get into next. This is where it's going to get interesting, right? So we've heard a couple things already this afternoon. Sonny has something that he wants to talk about. Here's a couple things that we've talked about internally and or things that came out of the executive committee meeting in October. So one is, remember this conversation that we had about management uncertainty buffers? So we are, as an impossible addition, impossible additions means if we have the resources, time, people, money, then in fact, we can address some of these possible additions. So right now, we have this one, 65, and then 66 is consider the development of an omnibus framework to adjust the council's ACL specification regulations as needed to provide monitoring committees additional flexibility in their ACL recommendations. And that's something that came out of our conversations the last time we talked about this in October. Again, that's something that we could consider again if resources become available. And with that, we also had a before we get to this, Mary, I think I'll get to that after I get to the part that relates to what Mike brought up. So if you could pull up that other, this one. So I think this is what Mike Bettany, this is what you're referring to, right? So this is an idea. We talked about it this afternoon. Basically, there were a number of things we talked about, but this rose to the top of the list, which is basically evaluating these confidence intervals as it relate to the RDM, right? And how these confidence intervals work, what the confidence intervals should be. And remember, we had the conversation about funding a contractor to basically do some background work that then could be evaluated to potentially, bring some information to the council to help us with this. So folks, I think, so this is what we're trying to address here. So as an aside, I had a conversation with Tony Kearns, and they in fact would have some money to support a contract to actually get this done, and which is good. We have to get the money out the door by June of 2026, which might make it a little tough, but I think we can do it. And once we have a contractor involved, once the contractor provides results, the idea would be that those results that be made available to a review group that could include some SSC members and some other folks to basically look at what the research indicated and then provide those results to us as recommendations. So this could work out pretty well in 2026. So this is a draft motion. I think I don't think we need it as a motion as much as just something that will add to the document, right? As long as folks agree. Everyone good with that? Any questions about that? Yeah, Greg.
What's a realistic timeline on that altogether, you think?
Realistic time on getting this done? Yeah, so basically, if in fact we want to move forward with this, we'll start moving on it right away, right? So develop the RFP, get a contractor hired in early 2026, hopefully in January, and let them start working on it. Because again, I just had a quick conversation with Tony about it. As I understand it, that money has to be spent by the end of June of 2026. So yeah, so it happened pretty quickly, which is good. Yeah, which is good. And then so then we'd have to wait for the results, and then we'd have to form the review group, right? So by the end of 2026, we should have something that we can look at and say, yeah, okay, this is how confidence intervals should work, for this whole recreation demand model, right? Okay.
John Harris.
I'll go to John here first and then come back. John?
Thank you, Chris. During the conversation earlier on Black Sea Bass, I understand the focus on confidence intervals, but I am concerned that it is a little too narrow. And should we in fact be looking to evaluate and provide guidance on how to deal with uncertainty in the inputs into the percent change approach? So we're not just focused on confidence intervals. We heard uncertainty come up in some of the other inputs as well. Mike Pentney brought up sort of uncertainty in catch, and then there were some questions regarding uncertainty in the age structure. So I understand the intent here, but I am concerned that the focus on confidence intervals is too narrow.
So, yeah, John, it's a good point. So remember the conversation that that we had with Jay McNamee. So Jay brought up the idea of how to proceed with the contractor, and he included some of that uncertainty that you're referring to, I think, in the way that he presented it. So certainly we could broaden the RFP to include that. I don't know how this would read then. So how would evaluate and provide guidance on the use of what?
Or how uncertainty impacts the percent change approach.
Right. The use of confidence intervals and how uncertainty impacts the percent change approach. Try that, Mary. Impacts or under that. There you go. Effects. That works. So that's what we would include at this point. This is what we would include in our 2026 implementation plan. How do folks feel about that? And Mike Louisi.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, based on the conversation this morning, I think this is a critical thing to start working on. And my question to you is, and you may have said it, does this need to be, do we need to find a replacement, find and, move this in and pull something out? Do we have to do that? Or do you think your 100% is got a little bit of buffer around it that this could fold in under?
Keep it 100%. So this is something, if you heard me, the resources, we're going to use ASMFC money, right? But will involve some staff time, right? But I think we can handle this. So this is a minor modification. Other questions, comments about this? So we're not going to do a motion. We're just going to add it to the document, right? So what I'd like to do next is go back to Sunny, who also had an idea about an additional something else that he wanted to add. Sunny?
Yeah, thank you, Chris. One of the things that we were talking about was the mackerel net, the 3-inch. And I was wondering if we could get that on the implementation plan for 2026, knowing that, it's a rebuilding stock. There's a lot of small fish. And I think that'd be really important to help that species, not only as a forage fish, but as an economic fish, and to raise that tail bag and to allow the smaller fish to escape. I think that would be a really important addition.
So, yeah, I think it's a good idea, Sonny. Certainly, given the conversation we had over the last day, the other day related to Atlantic mackerel. So, Sonny's referring to Atlantic mackerel, the lack of mesh regulations on Atlantic mackerel, the fact that we may want to have mesh regulations on Atlantic mackerel, the fact that we don't have any information on mesh size for Atlantic mackerel. So it's kind of tough to put a regulation in. That become a priority for the council in terms of supporting any research that we could get as soon as we could get it to help drive any sort of management regulations that we come up with for Atlantic mackerel. So I think it's a good idea, Sonny. I'd like to keep it in possible additions because it's money dependent. And I can't commit to actually supporting, with council funds, that research at this point. But I do think it's a good idea to put on the list. So that's another one, Mary, if folks agree with that, we'll add it to possible additions. So this is basically, go ahead, Sonny.
Yeah, and thank you, Chris. I think that'd be a great start. Thanks.
Okay. So, Rich?
Yeah, Sonny brings up a good point there. Personally, I would favor those type of applied research ideas over something like, for example, we spent a lot of time talking about the confidence intervals around for black sea bass, right? And now we're going to put efforts into that, exploring that. But honestly, and then it's building now. It's growing into an overall another investigation into the percent change approach, which we've used for a number of years and talked about for a very long time already. and it's been successful. But when I think about that confidence interval issue, I can't help but think we're making a mountain out of a molehill. This, to me, it was not a complicated problem, but we're overthinking it. The confidence interval width at 80% was just much larger for black sea bass than summer flounder and scup, and so, as such, as managers, we should just account for that, and we had a mechanism to do that. Now we're going to spend resources to look into a simulation about with the percent change approach, and I just think we tend to overthink things quite a bit here at this level, and honestly, we've made fisheries management more so complex that the public can't understand it. But anyway, that's my opinion. Thank you.
Other comments, questions? Yeah, Bobby.
Thank you, sir. Well, Sonny kind of took the wind out of my sails there because I was going to pitch the exact same thing because good or better or worse, 43 of my 48 years around here, I've been involved in mackerel. One thing I do want to, is kind of a softball I do want to offer up. I think it's important that the council reconsider the inclusion of the black sea bass quota and state allocation in the fishery management plan. It was rejected from the agency, but all of the heavy lifting's already been done. All of the work's kind of already been done there. There may be a way to kind of polish it and get it back in. From my standpoint, I don't like the idea. And honestly, I'm not looking to change anything. But the way it sits now, unless I'm looking at it incorrectly, ASMFC has the ability to reallocate without having a conversation or having council input. And that's really what I was just trying to move forward. So we would at least have a voice in the situation if it ever occurs. But I think that's something that could easily be added to the list considering how all the work's already been done.
So your excuse me, Bobby, your proposal would be to add it to possible additions. So if you think about what we might be involved with in 26 as it relates to allocations, and certainly this is an allocation question, issue that we've dealt with in the past. So this is the amendment 23 conversation, I think it's 23, that was disapproved by the service, that basically would have kept the state-by-state allocations for black sea bass in the federal FMP, which would allow, from our perspective, to make sure that the council and the board were involved in those conversations, if in fact anything ever changed. So we certainly could add that, two possible additions and see how that plays out as we get into allocation conversations and those kinds of things in 26. So I think it's fine to add it as a proposed addition. Certainly it's something that we were disappointed when it was disapproved, and certainly having it back to council to consider, I think might be something we want to do. Chris.
Yeah, thanks. I should know this, and I don't know if Tony or any ASMC staff are listening online, but I think when we took final action on the state allocations to the ASMFC side of the plan, we had a review in 5 years, and I can't remember if that year 5 is next year or 2027. I think it's coming up soon. So I was wanting to get some clarity on that and see how that lines up with Bobby's suggestion for other additions. Because if it's something that the ASMFC, and I think we would probably be there too, looking at this again, it could fold into something bigger if there was some a general agreement to reconsider the state-by-state allocations, at least on the ASMFC side of things.
So that would support the inclusion of this into possible additions, given those comments. Jim.
My old favorite topic, allocations by state. So why would we limit that though just to black sea bass? So, I mean, it's been a long-running issue of several species. So wouldn't it be a more general look at several species under that? I think.
Bobby's referring to the recognition of the state-by-state allocation, which does exist federally for bluefish and fluke, but not for sea bass. So.
Mary?
Maybe for clarity, if we're adding this, I should include the federal fishery management plan or in the council fishery management plan. Okay.
Okay, so we have several additional things that we've added to possible additions. So think about what else you might want to include there or anything else that you want to ask questions about or have comments on. I want to get to a surf clam industry letter. So before I do that, looks like I have a couple hands and then I'll get to that. So I'll go at Mike Pentney first and then Todd. Mike?
Yeah, I guess my question is more, well, starting as a process question. So I think, you threw up, Chris, a slide that said, potential motion to add an action. But now we seem to be just adding things without motions, because I can't support the latest suggestion to add black sea bass in state-by-state allocations into the federal FMP. We disapproved that for cause, and I'm unaware of anything that's changed that would change the outcome of that decision in terms of the reasons for disapproval have not been addressed nor overcome.
Okay, so given that, Mary, what I'd like you to do is bring up each one of those items separately. We'll have a motion, Mr. Chair, if that's okay with you. We'll just move this and decide how best to handle each one of these individually. So start with the first one, because we have to go. Not that one yet. Yeah, there we go. That one. So let's start there, and then before we do that, Todd, did you have a specific point?
Yeah, I did. Thanks. 66 is the monitoring committee flexibility. I was kind of wanting to understand a little bit more, being relatively new, the term consider on the front end. How firm of a consideration is that, and how much of a commitment is that? Is this something we want to have the monitoring committees to have that much more, I guess, oversight? Thanks.
So this would consider means that basically we would, if this moved up in the list, so this is possible additions right now. So if resources became available because something fell off the list or we couldn't do it, that we would devote resources, time, people, money to basically addressing this topic. The first thing would be scoping it out. Like, what does it mean exactly? Like, so we'd have a background document we provided the council, and then figure out how best to proceed. Does that make sense?
It does, and it sounds like it's a relatively time-consuming heavy lift for, if we're looking at additions, removals, that sounds like that's going to be something that's going to result in something else coming off.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm. Thanks.
Yep. Thank you. Mike Pentney.
Yeah, I mean, alternatively, if the council agreed, we could resolve this issue relatively quickly under 305D of the Magnuson Act. Just to refresh everybody's memories from the August meeting where we got wrapped up in this, the current regulations for the monitoring committee to bring forward to the council recommendations for the separate commercial and recreational ACLs say that the separate ACLs for the commercial and recreational fisheries, and this is for summer flounder, scup, and sea bass, the sum total of which shall be equal to the ABC recommended by the SSC. So it did not give the monitoring committee the flexibility to say, because of these uncertainties, we recommend that the sum of the ACLs be 10% less than the ABC. We could fix that by saying the sum total of which shall not exceed the ABC recommended by the SSC. And then your monitoring committees would have a little more flexibility to acknowledge what the ABC is, but also have a rationale if they suggest something slightly less than that ACL, ABC, without some of the awkward discussions that we had in August. We could fix that as an agency, in a very simple rulemaking. It takes about 5 minutes to write. So if the council wants to move forward on that, we could address that and take it off the plate of the council. If the council wants to dig into it more in depth, then Chris is right. I think it would require, preparing a white paper on the implications, but this doesn't seem like it's, from our perspective, it doesn't seem like that big of a lift to give us slightly more flexibility to your monitoring committee.
Thank you, Mike. So just to clarify, we're talking about giving flexibility to the monitoring committee. And I think everyone around the table understands that the monitoring committee doesn't make the final decision. So they're still providing us with a recommendation. They're just not as constrained as they are now. So if in fact, if it's just that, right, and not taking anything away from the council in terms of its ability to recommend things to the service, then I think why not? Why wouldn't we want to do that? Right? It just cleans it up a little bit and makes it less confusing. Michelle Duvall.
Thanks so much, Chris. And since I was the one who sort of brought this forward at our last meeting, I support Mike Penny's suggestion, as a way to sort of take this off the council's plate. I would also, in addition to summer flounder, scup, black sea bass, bluefish, I think blue line and golden tilefish have that same very simple language that it would just be, really a flick of the pen to modify that as well. Some of our other species are a little bit more complicated, like mackerel, squid, butterfish, but I think those 5-6 species would be pretty quick. Thanks.
So with that, this is another thing to add to your list, and we're going to need a motion based on what our prior conversation. So let's go through the things that are on the list, starting with this one. So yeah, I'll turn it over to you, Mr. Chair. Move through.
Thanks, Chris. Looking for someone to make the motion. Okay, Mr. Grist, if you wouldn't mind reading that in, and then I'll look for a second.
Mr. Chair, I move to add the following to the 2026 implementation plan. Evaluate and provide guidance on the use of confidence intervals and how uncertainty affects the percent change approach.
Thank you, Mr. Grist. Second by Mike Louisi. Discussion on the motion? Any objection to adding this to the plan? Rich? Okay.
Yeah, if we're voting, yeah, I would
Okay.
object.
Okay, sorry, we have a hand for a comment. Go ahead, Maureen.
We did not want to make this more general and only limit it to the confidence intervals. Oh, okay, thank you.
Okay. So I do see one objection. So we can, Mary, if we can make note of the one objection, and we'll consider that motion passed. Thank you.
Mary, what's next?
So this was my note while Sunny was offering the suggestion, but Bobby also sent some more refined language for, I guess, to sort of be the basis for a possible motion, although it's not fully in motion form yet. So if this aligns with Sunny's intent, we could start from here.
Yeah, so Bobby, would you be willing to read that in as a motion, and this would go under possible additions?
Yes, sir. All good. Move to add the following to possible additions. Assist in developing and implementing a mesh selectivity study for Atlantic mackerel to define appropriate square and diamond mesh sizes for the directed Atlantic mackerel fishery.
Thank you very much. Do we have a second? Okay, I'll take Sunny Gwynn on a second for that. Discussion on the motion? Not seeing any? Okay. Any objection to the motion? Very good. So that'll go under possible additions. Appreciated. Next. Okay, so we have had some discussion on this. I think, again, this is under possible additions. I think in part this would, if the motion did pass, it would be both reviewing the council's previous request and Garfo's response to that. And then I'm not exactly sure where it goes from there, but Bobby, as your proposal, would you mind making this motion and reading this into the record, please?
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman. Move to add the following to the possible additions. Reconsider the inclusion of black sea bass quota in state allocations in the council's fishery management plan, given the necessary and analytical work has already been completed.
Okay, great. Thank you. Do I have a second? Sunny Gwen? Okay. We have a motion before us. So let's see. There was some hesitancy, I feel like there. So I'll ask all those in favor of adding this to proposed additions, please raise your hand. Okay. I'll assume Sunny is. Okay. I see 5 hands. All opposed, please raise your hand. Sorry. All right. I'm going to have to ask for opposed again. The hands online came up late. Sorry, everyone. I have 10 opposed. All right. So the motion to add this as possible additions fails. Next item.
So we have the one on removing 66.
Is that just motion to remove number 66, or is there more? I just got to type that up real quick.
I'd leave that up to the regional administrator. Would you like to add some additional language to that?
Well, could I suggest an alternative way to approach that would be to, and maybe this is a motion, move to, and this is awkward if I'm making the motion, so maybe I'll say the words and somebody else could say, I'll make that as a motion. Move to ask NOAA Fisheries to address item 66 through a section 305D change to a rulemaking. And to explain that again, as I mentioned, under 305D, we have the authority, the Secretary has the authority to make minor changes to the regs to ensure that we're implementing the FMPs consistent with the council's intent. And so we could, as I suggested, make that slight change to the regulations where they are currently very constraining to the monitoring committee, to give the monitoring committees slightly more flexibility in the advice and recommendations that they bring to the council, as Chris noted, for the council's ultimate decision in its recommendations back to us.
Okay, and I see a hand online, Michelle. Is that your motion?
Yes, Mr. Chair, and thank you to Mr. Pentney for providing the verbiage, but I would be happy to move to ask NOAA Fisheries to address item number 66 through section 305D. I guess section 305D authority change to rulemaking. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Mary, did you have
Can I just clarify, are we also, as part of this motion, removing 66 from the plan? Do we need to add that to the motion, or is it implied?
Yes, we're fine.
Yeah, I think our understanding is that that by addressing it, it would. So we still need a second to that motion. I believe I saw a hand over here, Joe Grist. Okay, a second by Joe Grist. Any discussion on the motion? Okay, not seeing any. Anyone opposed to this motion? Any abstentions? The service abstains. Okay. All right, so that's approved by consent with an abstention by the service.
I think that's it, right? In our near-term list. There's still one item that we need to get back to, which is the surf plan letter. So we'll do that shortly. But before I do that, we've exhausted the list, right? Of the things that we've changed, Mary?
Yes, to my knowledge, all possible changes have been addressed through motions.
Okay, so thanks for that. Let's bring up that slide. So we did get public comment from the surf clam industry. There's a letter in the briefing book requesting the council support for a petition to reopen the Great South Channel Habitat Management Area to Atlantic surf clam fishing. So this is an issue that we've talked about before. It's an issue that the New England Council recently addressed as part of their 2026 priorities, and in fact included this evaluation of the Great South Channel Habitat Management Area surf clam exemption area as one of their priorities for 2026, which I think, again, Ted or Mike Petney means that it's a high priority, right, in terms of where it's at in the list. The letter that we got from the surf clam industry indicates, basically notes the lack of access is contributing to underutilization of the surf clam resource, and basically points out that the Mid-Atlantic Council staff can assist NIMS by providing expertise and any recommendations for potential management measures to help maintain a productive fishery in that HMA. So this, from my perspective, is something that we will be involved with. It is something that the New England Council is going to do, but we will have some involvement, right, in terms of staff involvement as it relates to surf clams. So I'm not sure that this particular issue needs to be included in our 2026 priorities. Something, again, we have interactions with New England staff quite a bit. So I don't think we need to do anything with this, but certainly if anyone thinks we do, now is a good time to let me know. So, Ted, did you have any comments about this particular issue?
Not particularly. It did kind of go right to the top in New England.
So we have talked about this before, but I would point out that, based on my conversations, an email exchange that I had with Kate O'Keefe, who's the executive director of the New England Council, there was at your meetings a lot of stakeholder interest in this particular topic. There is some research that's being conducted by Coonamessett Farm Foundation. That's going to come into basically be available to the council sometime in early or mid 2026. Both our staff and New England staff has been tracking that research, and it's an important thing to look at before any decisions are made relative to that HMA. She pointed out that the New England's Habitat Committee will be meeting in the spring to discuss the next EFH redesignation framework, which will include a discussion about work plans and timelines to conduct the review evaluation of this HMA. So I think that takes care of it. But again, because we did receive the letter, we're having the discussion today. And if there's anything else, Sean Guillen is here. Sean, if you have anything you'd like to say, and in addition to the things that I've said, certainly you're welcome.
Thank you, Chris, Mr. Chairman, members of the council. Sean Guillen, I officially represent International, but been working with Nantucket Sound Seafood, Atlantic Cape, Salamanca, Surfside. obviously it's been a long issue. I was here in August to promote this issue as part of your plan for measures to address the president's executive order 14276. Just to more fully say, where things stand, the Intershell had submitted a petition for rulemaking under the Administrative Procedure Act. Ostensibly, this starts a regulatory process, and we submitted that to Secretary Lutnick. Basically, not to go over your head, we've been here before, but it's the fact that the area has been closed by the New England Council, ostensibly to protect Atlantic cod habitat and other species. But as a New England species habitat measure, this council has management authority over the fishery itself. It's an important area. It's produced as much as 20% of coastwide landings. I know one of the reasons for the review of the ITQ program is just recognizing the fact that it's been grossly underfished for a long time, but I think, and I hear you, Mike, that Garfo does not have endless resources, but I think if the council's pulled together with the New England Council doing its review of the science and it's been more than Coonamessett Farms. Eric Powell's done a lot of research since Habitat Amendment 2, way back in 2017. There's a lot of new information out there. I think supports it's a very dynamic area, probably not seriously utilized by cod anymore just because of warming and things like that. So our request simply was a letter of support from this council for that process, and we're supportive. And I fully expect that staff here would be helpful to the extent there's any additional management measures that might be considered. But really, I think just a formal, and I don't know if it needs to be an implementation plan, but at some point is also we've requested just a letter from this council to New England, just expressing how important it is to this council as it's repeatedly expressed for obtaining optimum yield in the fishery. Thanks.
Okay, thanks for that. So once again, in our interactions with the New England Council, we'll reiterate our support for evaluation of that particular area. Okay. Other things that we need to talk about as it relate to anything in the 2026 implementation plan, possible additions, things that I forgot. I don't see any hands. No hands online. So I think we are done, except for one final motion. That one. So with that, Mr. Chair, I'll turn it over to you. Oh, wait, before I do that, I did forget one thing. I knew I would forget something. Any public comment on any aspect of the implementation plan? Now's your chance. We have Greg D. Domenico. Greg?
Thank you, Chris. Can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Apologies for not being there in person, but I did need some clarification on number 66, the issue with the monitoring committee.
Yeah, go ahead.
Does that mean that the monitoring committee can reduce the SSC recommendations at the OFL level or the ABC level, or are we talking just at the ACL level?
Mike Penny?
Yeah, thanks, Greg. It would not change, and we would not give the authority to the monitoring committee to change the recommendations of the SSC regarding ABC or OFL. It would give the monitoring committee the flexibility to recommend an ACL that is less than the ABC if they deemed that appropriate. And then, of course, they would have to provide a rationale to the council why they made that recommendation. But they would not be authorized to change the recommendation coming out of the SSC.
Mike, can you hear me?
Sure can.
If I could, does that mean where they can? Well, that means they can only lower it, right?
Yes, but that's true regardless because the Magnuson Act does not allow the council to develop ACLs in excess of the ABC recommendations of its SFC.
Of course. Thank you very much.
Okay, thanks for that. Anything else? Other questions, comments? Okay, hearing none, here's a proposed draft motion. Mike Louisi, I'll turn over to the chair.
Yeah, thanks, Chris. I'd be happy to make the motion. I move to approve the 2026 implementation plan as modified today.
Thanks, Mike. Second by Jim Gilmore. Discussion on the motion? Not seeing any. Oh, Michelle?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to say thank you to Mary for all the work that she puts into the implementation plan and how that has evolved over the years. I mean, I really appreciate the addition of the project descriptions. I think it really adds so much to the implementation plan. So just a huge hats off to Mary for, being the steward of this. Thanks.
Yeah, and thank you for leading the charge on that. Absolutely agree, and a lot of heads nodding around the table. Jason Didden has his hand up. Go ahead, Jason. Yep, Jason, we can't hear you if you're speaking.
How about now?
Yep. There you go.
Okay. Jenny Couture of New England Fishery Management Council staff flagged to me that New England did add scoping for a monkfish ITQ to their implementation plan. So that, that would be led by them, but they do plan to bring, to collaborate with scoping, get a scoping document approved. I don't think it needs to be not sure if it needs to be in our implementation plan. I don't think it needs to be, but it is something that will pop up and I would just kind of collaborate on New England as that develops. But anyway, Jenny brought it up, so I just wanted to flag that.
Yeah, thanks, Jason. Yeah, but just very briefly speaking with Chris, assuming that you have some level of participation in that, we don't think we need to add that specifically to the implementation plan. So appreciate that additional note. So again, call the question. Is there any objection to the motion as is? Okay, not seeing any objections, any abstentions. Okay, so Mary, that'll pass by unanimous consent. Chris?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So Michelle beat me to the punch. I wanted to thank Mary for all her hard work on this implementation plan. Again, her 12th implementation plan. So, I want to recognize her. Also, again, there's a number of documents in the briefing book that I didn't go over. So Michelle referenced, some of those. So take a look at those. That includes the 2025 to 29 strategic plan, our old implementation plan with the status updates, our response to that executive order, and some other things. So, take a look if you haven't yet. So thanks, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you, Chris. And that'll conclude the agenda items for today. So thank you, everyone, for your participation. Thank you to the assistant administrator. Very much appreciate your participation as well, and all of NOAA staff coming with some home field advantage for some folks here. So we'll wrap up today. We'll begin again tomorrow at 9. We're going to start off with updates on the IRA projects. And Chris, any other announcements?
Yeah. So we will have hospitality this evening. It's in room 1517. So 1517. If you're not staying in the hotel, and if you don't have a key, you're not going to be able to get up to the 15th floor. So you got to find a buddy with a key to take you up there. So a number of the staff are staying here at the hotel. They have keys. Certainly, if there's any issues getting up, let us know and we'll come down and get you. So you can call Call that room if you need to, 1517. And everyone's invited. Hospitality is starting now. So as soon as you get there. Thanks.
So I heard. No. He had originally said he was planning on making it. Michael said that he was at work. Yeah, no,